everyone. Welcome. So excited to have you all here as folks trickle in. Super excited. My name is Sadel Turbovsky. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at OpenGrants, and we are the easy way to win grant funding. Super excited to have this awesome crew from the Environmental Protection Network here today. Before we do any introductions, just a little bit of housekeeping items. And this is also just to let people in the room here for those who are just joining the webinar. So just a few housekeeping items. We do have the Q&A open. So if you do have questions during the session today, please use the Q&A tool. We don't have the chat available for everyone's comfort and so that we can all focus on the content. So we will have the Q&A options open throughout the webinar. And this is the OpenGrants webinar with the Environmental Protection Network. So we're super excited to have you all here. And just so you know, this will be available afterwards. It's one of the most popular questions that we always get. So we're going to record this. It will be available afterwards. And we will be sending out emails with everyone's contact info, all of the links, anything that anyone wants to share will also be made available to everyone who has registered for this event. So we're super excited to have you all here. And as I mentioned, my name is Sadel Turbovsky. I am the CEO and co-founder here at OpenGrants. And I am super excited to be joined by Sierra and Kaya and Michelle from the Environmental Protection Network. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion today.
Thank you, Sadel. We are so excited to be here. I am Kaya Williams. Again, we're with the Environmental Protection Network, a value provider providing capacity building, technical assistance support pro bono. I'm the community outreach manager, and I physically live in Virginia Beach. And then just thank you, Sadel, for having us. I think, you are a tremendous partner to all of the work we're doing. And yeah, thank you for joining. I can pass it over to Michelle. You want to go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a lovely evening, a lovely morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone, or evening, honestly. But I'm Michelle McKinley. I'm a senior outreach associate with the Environmental Protection Network, and I work to support our communities in EPA Region 6 and EPA Region 8. I'll pass it on to Sierra.
Michelle, greetings and salutations. My name is Sierra Talafero, and I am part of the community out. And I help to serve communities within regions 3 and 4. So that is the Southeast Atlantic. And I am based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Awesome. So excited to have you all here. I think, I did not know that the Environmental Protection Network existed before I launched OpenGrants, which was in 2020. So once I was able to connect with y'all, I was super excited. I was like, oh my goodness, this cool organization exists and they're doing such cool work. So we wanted to host this session to dive into who is the Environmental Protection Network? What do y'all do? And so I kind of want to start with that. I'd love to hear y'all's takes on what's the Environmental Protection Network? Why do you exist, kind of thing.
Yeah, I can start us off if you guys are okay with that. So what I like to tell people, our origin story is we were formed as a reaction to the Trump administration. So a lot of the former EPA people quit under Trump, and they formed our organization in terms of protecting the integrity of the environment, still educating Congress on facts, and making sure everything that's coming out is still rooted in science. So that's kind of how we were formed. So a lot of our initial work was around policy, and it was around fact checking and those kind of things. But about 2.5 years ago, we started doing our pro bono technical assistance work. And that's when when Kaya was hired and the rest of associates were kind of hired to help work directly with communities on different projects related to the EPA. So what we do, our work is communities come to us with different questions that, are under the umbrella of the EPA, which is a very vast umbrella. And we have almost 600 former EPA alumni that work to answer and to support communities as they navigate different environmental injustices. I can also pass it to my colleagues to add on anything that I potentially have missed. So, yes.
No, I think that was great, Michelle. I think only one other thing I would add in is just what a tremendous support Michelle and Sierra and our other associates are to the team, working, as value providers, providing capacity building technical assistance with, former bureaucrats. It can be a little difficult for these community-based organizations to work with just because, bureaucrats and community history doesn't always align. So to make both entities feel complemented, Michelle, Sierra, and other associates of our organization do work as almost liaisons to bridge that gap and make sure that both sides do feel comfortable. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that is something we definitely acknowledge. And yeah, we like to meet groups where they are. So yeah, we are happy to talk a little bit more about maybe how we get connected with some of the communities and what that looks like.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead. Would love to go into that more. I wanted to double click on something you said that I think is really cool, which is, you mentioned specifically like bridging, that relationship between these communities and some of the bureaucracies that exist. And I do think, this is one of the things that, I think is really important because the government has traditionally been this really incredible resource, but problematic from time to time. And it is really important that communities learn how to work with government and vice versa, that government can learn how to work with communities. And so I really applaud like the work that you do in that space. And yeah, would love to like dive in more about how you connect with folks, and maybe even if you could talk to maybe some of the specifics or share some kind of like case studies of how you engage and work with people would be great.
Yeah, I can speak to some of the broader questions, and then maybe Sierra and Michelle go a little bit more in depth about the work you do in your region, since kind of does vary based on location. So in terms of that bridging part, I think it's definitely important to take that unique perspective of a bureaucrat when it comes to something like grant writing. These are the people who have, created a lot of these programs or pulled a lot of applications. They know what makes a strong application. So at EPN, we just really, really acknowledge that unique perspective and want to harness that knowledge to uplift and empower communities, almost taking that that government that's a little bit harder to navigate and making it a little bit more digestible for these communities in a way that they can feel complimented and empowered and overall confident when not only applying, but just navigating funding opportunities offered by government entities and whatnot, just because, again, it is very hard to digest and can be confusing to just, the lay eyes. I have been working in this EJ space for a little while, and I still get stumped at acronyms and certain words I find myself Googling. So I can't imagine how community-based organizations are supposed to take these like 20-page long documents and read them as a rubric and turn it into a application. So yeah, just looking at ways to bridge that gap in that navigation and just that technical language, and acknowledging these community leaders and community-based organizations as the expert in their community, because again, a lot of times they were the ones to see the historical timeline of how these issues came into manifestation, and also understand the most complex parts of the issue in terms of its intersections. And I think that's really important when thinking of solutions that'll actually move things forward, as these are all complex issues. And if there was one or any solutions, we wouldn't be doing, the work we do. So yeah, definitely taking a very active listening approach in this work. Again, Michelle, McKaylee, and Sierra and I are working as these like liaisons between these communities and these agency workers to make sure that there's a relationship and also trust building involved. But I'm going to pass it over to Michelle, McKaylee, and Sierra to maybe talk about examples and also the work they do in their regions and what a connection with a request might look like.
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay. Me in particular, I am based in the Southeast. So I am based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the Southeast. And so for my communities within this region, they really emphasize and stress in various facets. And so for a lot of the communities that I work with, it's really been opportunities, but also in addition to water quality and reaching out our network that can assist with certain qualifications or data analysis necessarily understand, and how to perhaps even bring that information to a case that they're fighting in the court as well too. So it can vary from time to time what those cases look like, what those requests look like, but it's really been about connecting communities that reach out to us in particular, or me in my region, and connecting experts who may have also been in the office at one point, who dealt a lot with the water quality or pollutants in the water of some kind. So those are some of the commonalities I request in my region, but I'll certainly pass it off to Michelle as well.
Yes, thank you, Sierra. Yeah, so I think for me, I'm based in Houston, Texas, and I'm the Region 6 associate. So I do a lot of our work around petrochemicals, and I do a lot of work around lead and Superfund sites. And so, for example, on petrochemicals, what that looks like is, okay, we're doing research on this permit for this facility, this proposed facility. What does commenting period look like for that? I'm working on a different project around figuring out gaps in plants, and like, what does that look like, and how can we give that information to communities for them to leverage in terms of advocating for themselves, in terms of either more stringent standards in that area, the plants being held accountable, the plants compensating the communities more for the damages that are in their community, the worst health outcomes that are in their communities. So it can look like a lot of different things. In terms of lead, for example, I'm based in Houston, so I have a project here in one of our communities that is around, there's lead throughout the whole entire neighborhood. This administration has about $240 million dedicated to lead replacement. So how can we get communities who have lead pipes to access that money? So a lot of it right now is like, we need data, because we need to prove like, okay, there's lead there. Is that data that like EPA or like that can help you access this money? So is this the correct way to access data? And then our volunteers are looking at the data and like, okay, what does this mean? Based on this data, what money can you access? So those are just some 2 examples of like what that can look like. But what I like to tell people is just reach out. If it's not under our umbrella, we'll try to find somebody else. But the EPA umbrella is very vast, very huge. I'm also working on a Superfund project. And, we have Jim Wolford, he's the former Superfund director. He has a very, very vast knowledge of the different Superfund sites and how you can, meet with him, and you can like, okay, this is where you can apply pressure to the agency to add to maybe, look at this in terms of the Superfund site. So those are some different, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, do you want to just explain real fast for folks listening
yes.
what a Superfund site is?
Yes, I apologize. A Superfund site is essentially a EPA regulated hazardous waste site, and it is so that that means so a lot of former Army former military sites are Superfund sites. Any type of area that is very hazardous is going to cause cancer, is going to cause harm, has direct health impacts to the communities living near it, and it's actively being trying to clean up by EPA. But sometimes that process looks different depending on what state you're in, what regulations are in place, and so different health organizations usually work to kind of apply pressure to EPA to help clean up those sites. So I hope, yes, my knowledge is also very limited, but yeah, that's a quick synopsis.
I love it. No, that's a great description. I think, those are great overviews. I'd love to hear about what it looks like from like the community standpoint, working with you on these projects. Like, how do they get connected to you? How does that process go? Does it cost money? What does it look like to work with y'all? I'd love to, just dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, first I will clarify that the Environmental Protection Network is not the Environmental Protection Agency. We are mistaken sometimes. Also that, Yeah, from the community standpoint, I will say don't be scared to reach out, even if you don't have a specific request or issue at hand. If you just want to connect with us and be on, say, a listserv or hear updates about some of the work we're doing, and most importantly, some of the work that the community leaders or volunteers we work with are doing, feel free to just send any of us an email. We are happy to, connect with you. There isn't been anything you can be a part of. We don't have community member coalition yet. It is one of our long-term goals to create a space for communities to come together and learn lessons. But if you want to be a volunteer, you can also just email us. I think in terms of requesting assistance, we pride ourselves in taking a very organic, holistic, and nonlinear approach. This just means that we can basically assist anyone, no matter what their capacity is. Sometimes we are approached by, someone who would consider themselves a regular mom, neighbor who has a full-time job, and they noticed, something in their drinking water is making them sick, but they have no idea what. They just know that they're having these harmful effects, and they don't know what to do or where to start. We can assist you in navigating the issues at hand and trying to assess what the issue is, and then also work together to brainstorm collaboratively solutions. And we never work off behalf of our communities. Everything we do is on behalf of the community because they have asked us to do it or have approved it. We are happy to brainstorm solutions for various issues. I think what most relevant recently, we've been doing a lot of grant writing support. So something like sam.gov or grants.gov, in order to obtain that UEID entity number, which is required to apply for any federal funding. It's pretty easy if you know how to do it, but it's just so many words and it's so much to navigate. So sometimes just having someone kind of hold your hand and walk you through. So again, just taking a very broad approach so that we can genuinely be able to help anyone. We do target our audience towards, underserved and EJ communities who have been impacted by negative impacts of environmental justice, but we do take a very, intersectional, approach or perspective when working with these groups. So it doesn't have to be, it can be climate. It can kind of correlate in the way that if it overlaps with EJ or if it rhymes with the EPA or related agencies, will basically try to help you. And like Michelle McKaylee mentioned earlier, if we are not able to help you, we do work in this network of resources with other value providers who we personally trust and have vetted and also have referred communities to in the past and gotten feedback from. So again, trusted entities that we can connect you with to provide resources. And again, you mentioned, how much does it cost? It is all free. We do not believe in charging anyone for this work. If anyone from EPN contacts you asking for money, block them. It is fake. They are scamming, phishing, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, we don't charge. I think right now it's definitely relevant that, community-based organizations or smaller NGOs have pro bono resources so that when they are applying for opportunities and funds, they can make sure they're paying for resources that are a lot harder to obtain, such as a grant writer, when folks like us are at capacity. Michelle and Sierra, I would maybe love to hear about some of your connections and what that looks like and how you've been contacted, whether via webinar and email, because it happens all over the place.
Yeah.
I would definitely have to echo some of the things that Kaya has said when it comes to us or who reach out to us. And it's mostly a lot of the individuals. Those are the uncles, truly those who see an injustice happening in their area or in their neighborhood. What to do next? I personally get a lot of those, especially as it relates to water, or if it relates to air quality or water pollution. I get a lot of those requests as well, but it's truly it's people where they are and at ground level, and making sure that we have this holistic approach of sure that everyone is welcome to reach out to us for assistance, no matter what status you are in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people reach out to us, either we present on this and then they get our email and then they're in our inbox. We attend conferences regularly. So I think we meet communities at some of those spaces. We also have a kind of an intake form on our website. Sometimes they come through there, where somebody would just put their email in a quick synopsis of their request, and that will arrive at the appropriate associate's inbox. So I think there's all these different ways. It's very informal. Just send us an email. We'll usually get on a call, have an initial call to try and understand kind of what you're trying to figure out, what your what the issue is, and then from there the associate will start doing outreach to our network, and we'll try to let you know early if it's not something that is within our like that we do, but if it is, then we'll be like, oh, what times can we meet, or here's some information around that, whatever that needs to look like. So yeah.
Awesome. So reach out, go do it. No, that's really great. And I just want to remind folks who are listening that, feel free to drop any questions you might have in the Q&A. But there's a lot of discussion going on right now around IRA, bipartisan infrastructure, all of this money that is just pouring out of the government. And one of the conversations we have frequently is they're like, well, there seems to be all this money everywhere, but we're not getting any of it. And so this is a struggle that folks face. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about, how y'all are supporting any of those processes, and any of the thoughts you might have about, ways folks can take some actionable, non-overwhelming steps to advance some of their projects and support their community in tapping into some of these opportunities that are out there right now.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you guys wanted me to jump in or not. Yeah, I that's a very good question. I think I have to kind of approach it from a few different angles. Like you said, there's so much rolling out right now in terms of funding and resources. And yeah, it's important that we do meet this moment, because at the end of the day, this money is going to go somewhere. And at EPN, we are most focused on that this funding and these resources are going to these communities or these places that really, really, truly need it most, these underserved and a lot of the times, ignored communities and community-based organizations. But again, taking a very service learning and almost active listening approach to this, something like approaching funding or grant writing, you kind of have to have a relationship with the group to write a grant. So again, even if you aren't currently looking at applying to federal funding or funding right now, please reach out and get connected with us. I think building relationships is really, really important to this work, especially when applying to something like writing an application, because you do need to know who you're writing about and goals and objectives. So please build relationships with NGOs and us and rely on these resources for support, because it is really helpful. And at EPN, having these former EPA alum, a lot of these volunteers we have or experts were the people who either created, managed these programs, and they have reviewed applications and they know what makes a strong versus a weak application. So we try to approach this in a myriad of ways. First, that registration with the UEID assistance. One of the first steps, I think, is just making sure you have that UEID entity number, because it is required to apply for federal funding. And then from there, strategic planning, figuring out what is the goal, what kind of funding do we need to be looking for, because it's too often that we are reached out by a group about a specific opportunity. They might not get it, or they do get it, or there's not an opportunity available right now. But as Sadale mentioned, these funding opportunities are rolling out every day, so fast, because they're just trying to get them out there. So yeah, just get ready, build partnerships now. We help a lot of our community organizations find and identify partners who are not only trusted, but align with the work they're doing, because a lot of these applications call for partners. So building them ahead of time or last minute in some cases. We have also provided checklist templates and other related resources to work as almost, again, a checklist to kind of, when you're applying for these funds, basically go through and say, oh, I did this for the budget. Oh, cost benefit analysis, everything that the RFA or request for application called for is within your application. So that just means one of us or our volunteer will go through and read this extremely long application and put it out in a bullet point format and make a proposed timeline for it. The proposed timeline is completely informal. We hope that all of our groups can apply a little bit early. That way, if there is any technical issues, we're able to, remedy them sooner rather than later. But we are, again, willing to do last minute. We just try to avoid it because it's so stressful. So yeah, it's many solutions, and we're happy to send these out after this call. But workshops, Q&As, office hours, we try to definitely prioritize RFAs or opportunities that we know a lot of groups are applying for. I'm not sure if anyone was familiar with the EPA's Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Grant or the Government to Government Grant, but that did happen, I want to say maybe April, don't quote me. I was some months back, but they're all blending together at this point. But we had 150 requests for applications, which is the most, or requests for assistance on applications. And 150 is a big number for us as a smaller organization. This was a eye-opening moment that we needed to prepare, that this funding is coming out and that people really do need help when applying for it. So in that moment, we triaged and began to survey ways that we can uplift and empower these communities. The checklist template, those resources have been tremendously helpful in terms of feedback we've gotten from community organizations. And if there is a specific opportunity that you are interested in applying for and we have not already created a proposed process with those templates, please feel free to email us. I think one of the major issues we're finding is trying to figure out what people are interested in. We don't want to create templates and resources that no one's going to use. So we try to prioritize those resources that a lot of people are applying for, like those 150 applications. So yeah, we are, happy to hear if you know that this is a big opportunity coming up and you know that you and a few other of your partners are going to be applying, give us an email so we can try to get a template out there as soon as possible, because if you're applying, I'm sure there's others who are interested as well. Yeah, I think that was a very big question, but I feel like I covered it. If anything was confusing or all over the place, Michelle, Sierra, feel free to clarify.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, for the current template that we have that is for current grant is a Solar for All grant. So if any of you are applying for that, please reach out. I think the deadline for that is the end of this month. We have a template and we have a filled out template that you can look at, like a sample application of what that can look like. Within our templates, there's project narratives, there's a budget template, there's letter of commitments. What does all that need to look like? So please reach out in terms of accessing some of those resources. That's the only thing I was going to emphasize.
Awesome. I love it. No, and that was a fun project. We had a good time collaborating a bit with y'all on that project. And yeah, it's a great service. I can't stress enough for communities and folks that are out there. It is so nice to be able to access a resource that has been vetted. Some templates, like when you're looking at these big RFPs, it goes from being this like 80-page thing that you have to read to have some very clear language of like, all right, this is what we need. And it does give you that kind of like, here's some real next steps you can take without getting overwhelmed. There are a lot of cool programs forthcoming, Solar for All being one of them. And yeah, definitely make use of this great resource here. I'd love to, like, if you have some success stories that you want to share, I think that'd be really cool. There's some cool questions here in the Q&A too that we can dive into a bit, but maybe we hit like favorite success story or something from your region that you just want to share, and then we can get into these Q&As. if that sounds good, unless there's anything else. But
Yeah. One thing I will mention is first, thank you, Sadale. He's saying thank you to us for providing these resources, but he was a tremendous help in getting them up. I think we probably couldn't have done it without you. And, that piloted to be able to be duplicated and done for, other opportunities, future opportunities. In terms of success stories, I think there's so much, I think. There's a lot that has moved me back in this work, but a lot has also moved me forward. I think for me, one of the most success stories might have been when we got that 150 request, just because up until that point, it seemed like a lot of these community-based organizations, or at least these groups that really, really needed, they weren't interested in applying. And I understand it was probably really scary and they probably felt overwhelmed, but once these resources, and not just from us, from other entities as well, began to kind of roll out and become aware, I saw a lot more groups become interested and actually apply. And even if they weren't selected, the application process was really valuable in terms of lessons learned and getting that experience. And now they are more confident and they're applying to other opportunities. So yeah, I think it's just really inspiring to see, and just it warms my heart and makes all of this definitely a lot more worth it, because it would just break my heart if they don't at least apply for these opportunities and put themselves in these positions. It is uncomfortable because it's like, even if you do get awarded, now what? And I'll mention really quickly, we are trying to look at that gap and how to help communities who are getting awarded, or community-based smaller organizations who are getting awarded these opportunities, how to manage them. Something like reporting and management of funds can also be really, really difficult. And when it comes to the agency, nothing is in like lay terms, it is in a different language. So definitely rely on folks for that management portion as well, because retention is extremely important. So yeah, that is one exciting thing I've seen.
love it.
Yeah, and I can go next. I think success is such an interesting term, because how do you quantify success in this space? When we're dealing with like a lot of systemic racism, we're dealing with a lot of just historical environmental injustice that, a lot of times feels like you're making iterative change. But also you gotta be farsighted enough to be like, okay, this is heading somewhere, right? But I think for me, anytime a community dances on a call, I'll take my wins where I take my wins. So I think we had Sierra and I attended a conference held by the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with them. And during that, it was like a very tangible conference. We held a workshop around Solar for All. We held a workshop around helping communities sign up for SAM.gov and grants.gov. And that is something, I don't know if any of you have tried to do that process. It's a very jargony process, for lack of a better word. And walking through that process with communities and they dance at the end, I'm gonna dance too. Like, that's what we're gonna do. And that's honestly my success story in this work, is just those moments of joy that I'm able to be like, okay, yeah, this is actually helping, and we're actually doing something, and all of that. But I'll pass it on to Sierra.
No, I would echo that as well. And I think you hit it right on the nail. Capturing the joy of success in those small victories, and those small victories getting registered for SAMs.gov and grants.gov. That is really based the grants that if you want to register or get funding for, you need to start there. Are not aware of it or need assistance with getting registered, and that's a team. So when we can get communities who are at ground level, those grassroots, where the government tends to miss them in this huge gap that we're trying to fill, when in turn they often get left behind. And so at least how I think of it, are able to raise those communities up a level or three, to getting them registered, the first step in the bigger scale of things. So yes, definitely that would echo that.
Awesome. I love that. Let's dive into some of the questions here, because there's some good ones. The first one is, how can someone be part of the EPN?
send us an email. Anyone get in contact with us, we will point you in the right direction. So, email any one of us and we're happy to connect.
Awesome. And I feel like this might be like maybe they're interested in volunteering or working, but
if you're interested in volunteering, I don't say that. I will track you down. We are constantly looking for volunteers, both expert and non-expert. I think one thing we've explored is having potential community volunteers, because again, they are experts as well. And if you want to volunteer to kind of be doing a little bit of what Sierra and Michelle and I do in your community and working with these bureaucrats in a volunteer-like capacity, we are happy again to connect and build relationships. Very, very broad, but yeah.
Awesome. A question, hi, from Miami, healthy little Havana, doing work with social determinants of health and housing. They just want to know who are the partners, like who are the contact people for the Fort Lauderdale area?
Hello, I love that question. Sounds like you're in Calle Ocho, which is where I love. Some of especially in Fort Lauderdale, a group to keep in mind is definitely a regional compact. I believe they have a conference coming up shortly, so definitely some eyes on, because it's both regional, local government partners and officials as to be available resource. So happy to connect you to that resource if necessary.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll include links and such in the recording and the other info we send out. Another great question, is there representation for the Western region? This person is with ePave, based in Los Angeles, focused on reducing greenhouse gases caused by pavement, especially in cities.
Yes, we have.
Before you chime in, I'm so sorry, everyone. I am actually at a community event for air quality right now, and it's about to start. So I am going to jump off, but I wanted to thank everyone for having me here. And this is just, really impactful. And we're really excited. We were really excited when Sadale reached out. So I urge everyone to connect with us. And yes, Sierra and Michelle are great. So you guys are in good hands. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry about that.
Bye, Kaya. Good luck. So Los Angeles, yes, we have associates for every EPA region. So every region is covered. We have 2 associates, that one is based in San Diego and the other one is based in Seattle, to cover kind of the western part of the country. So yeah, absolutely happy to make those connections when you reach out.
Awesome. Yeah. So and I see a few questions about that, like who's covering Northern California, Sacramento areas. So we will we'll send over info on all of that. But for those who are here, I realized that it sounds like there were some issues with some of the Zoom links. So I think only a part of the crew got in today as well. So we'll send out this follow-up and the video, and we'll get you all networked in and connected to the right people. A good question here on just sort of the scope of kind of things y'all offer. Following up on the IRA and Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, does EPN help with or identify partners for DOE specific grants?
I can go ahead, Sierra.
Oh, I was like, can you hear me okay? The question was, does EPN help with or identify partners for DOE specific grants? For those grants that we have, we do emphasize the most when it comes to partnerships is connecting those communities, either partners within the region or other partners that are kind of doing similar work. And so provide a list of partners who are kind of also applying for that federal funding as well. It's also listed on our website for reference.
Yeah, and also we do help with DOE grants, especially because DOE does not have a community aspect, because DOE is originally just a research entity. They meet a lot of their EJ qualifications under the new Biden administration through EPA. So a lot of their funding opportunities are coming out through EPA. So for example, with solar and some of those, so we do DOE grants because of that. Our DOE expertise is obviously not as robust as our EPA, but for example, for the Solar for All, we have a template for that. We have some people who have at least, like, they're not maybe specific, but have a scope of understanding of some DOE grants. So absolutely.
Awesome. Love that. What a couple other really good ones here. What's the optimal time frame before a due date to kind of engage y'all to support organizations that are applying for funding?
Really, I'll jump in. You can really highly encourage to start in the beginning. But if you really are trying to get your foot in, but if you're more advanced in the process, you're more than welcome, at least maybe I'd say a month in, if you have all of your documents aligned. And if you need someone to read over for review, just to make sure the flow is necessary materials. But I'll also let Michelle in if there's anything that I may have missed as well. I'm sure she too.
No, I echo everything she said. I think as early as possible. And yeah, as early as possible, but there's not really a time frame because we understand these things are very complicated.
Awesome. And another good question here. Do you have resources for publishing multi-stakeholder collaborations for grants? So for example, workshops or task forces that, you know, you're working to maybe bring together city and county and school districts and so on.
So I think we have had workshops to help build capacity for local municipalities that are smaller and things like that. And that is something we have definitely done. I think, you know, I would say reach out. I would need to know exactly.
And I may have said that wrong.
Okay.
I might have been reading too fast, but the question is like, do you have resources to help like bring together these different groups? So one of the things that you know is happening, so pushing forward multi-stakeholder collaboration, so building like consortia or that kind of thing.
So I would say what we do is communities just reach out to us and say, hey, do you know anybody applying for this grant? And if we do, we'll connect them. And if we don't, we'll be like, so sorry, we don't know anybody, right? So I think it's basically word of mouth. And if we know people in this space that are applying, we'll be like, hey, you guys should have a conversation. You might want to work together, you might not. That would ultimately be your decision. But we both know you're applying for this opportunity. So in the sense of like word of mouth, connecting people as a connector, yes, we do. But not formally structured in any capacity.
Yeah, and I'll also echo that it's about closing the triangle, and keeping is what they also call it. So if there's people that we know who are, or organizations that we know doing something similar, and we think that you might be a good connector, then we definitely do that.
Awesome, very cool. There's a question here about and I think I already know the answer, but there's a question about like folks in Canada. Like I assume your scope is really focused on the United States and generally around like the EPA, but maybe I don't know the answer. I'm seeing.
Yeah, so we have taken requests from Mexico. I've done a request in Africa. And we've done one somewhere else that I can't think of right now. So it's obviously not the bulk of our work, but if we think we can provide expertise, we'll at least attempt. Also, we have partners that sometimes work in those spaces. And so like, also a lot of times we just work as a connector kind of earlier of like, oh, hey, we're not the perfect fit for this, but C2P2, they do projects all across the country. Has done projects across, you know, other continents. They might be a better fit. So I would say still reach out. It might not be us, but we might have partners that work in that space.
Awesome. I learned something new, and that is very cool. That's so cool that you do that. So I think you know, a couple of the there's definitely still a few questions here that are more about just like place-based, kind of like what resources are available here. I know that you do have a slide that will flash up here as we get closer to the end. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about just your process when it comes to like building the templates and supporting these communities. There's a lot that goes into all of this, of course, and I just wonder, how do you, you know, how are you typically seeing communities approach you? Are they coming with, are you finding more folks who are like coming with specific projects where you're just ready to help them execute? Or do you even help folks who are like, hey, I just kind of like know that there's federal money out there. I don't have any idea about anything other than I think I could help my community somehow. How can I help my community? Is that an appropriate level of preparation to reach out to you? Or would you rather, or is it more productive if they can come with like projects ready to go? Or do you find it's better, the opposite, where you might help them, put a project together?
I'm going to jump right in because I get both sides of the scale. So it's depending on the community or the individual who's coming our way. We're really able to help from both ends. It just depends on the project.
I will also add, our goal is to build capacity. So we can't say we want to build capacity and only work with communities that are potentially ready. So I think like we definitely have communities who are like, and that's why we kind of like, when we meet with, we're almost triaging and kind of being like, okay, you are like, you still need to apply for SAM.gov. You still need to figure out what your project scope is. You need to, and we sometimes have communities hop on a call with the volunteer to kind of figure out what's the scope of your project going to look like. You need to focus more on this. You need to add this. You need to take this away. Like that brainstorming process is still critical and is still a part of capacity building. So I would say, we try to help communities where they're at. That might mean you don't apply this round because you're not ready, but we're preparing you for the next round is how we see it.
Awesome. No, that's great to know. I think, oftentimes we find folks who are afraid to get started because they don't think they, know enough to get started. That kind of like catch-22 sort of thing of like, how am I going to get an experience if I don't have experience? And I think it is really important. Like we encourage folks, we're like, just go ask, talk to people, talk to somebody. Like I was on a call a couple of days ago with a group that is trying to raise money. I was like, well, did you ask people for money? And they're like, no. I was like, well, how do you expect to get money if you're not going to ask? So that's super cool to hear. As we wrap up here with we've got about 10 more minutes. Definitely, if you do have other questions, please do feel free to throw those in the chat. But I'd love to talk a bit more about just like where EPN is headed. Like, there was a mention of some kind of like community groups. Would love to hear like what's on the roadmap for y'all. What are y'all focused on trying to achieve, that kind of thing.
I can go, that's fine. I think at EPN, one of the things that we're really working on is really capacity with understanding that a lot of our communities need our assistance. And so we're just trying, and who else are we missing? Who are other community groups that we're trying to reach out? Intersections between environmental justice and the work that they're doing. Environmental justice can affect all of us in some capacities. We just have to find those connections. And so in some ways to just find the dots and find those communities that we don't necessarily as often, to see how we can help them in their efforts as well.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, in terms of where we're going, we've hired a lot this summer. Like we added like 5 new associates. So I think we're building our capacity to reach communities right now actively. I still cover 2 regions and Sierra still covers 2 regions, but some of the new associates only have 1 region that they cover. And that really makes them able to reach more communities within their region. So I would say like that is the first thing we're doing as an organization, is just trying to expand our span. As another thing is we are working with, so EPA has the Thriving Tic Tacs. I cannot have another acronym under my belt. It's called the Thriving something something something. But it's basically technical assistance centers that EPA has launched. And I think those are going to be critical in terms of supporting communities in these areas. And with the work that we do, we have partnered with some of them. And so I think those are going to be great ways for like places for communities that are there and accessible, that communities can go to access technical assistance. And it's just going to be another place that communities can go. So I think we're working to support them launch that as well, and like a lot of the centers figure out different things, because we've been doing this work for a couple of years, and we're hoping that that's another resource that communities can have. So I would say everything that Sierra said, definitely like monthly meetings. For example, I don't know if anybody on this call is received their air monitoring grant, but we have a network of communities we're working to support to manage that grant, because once you get the money, that's a whole different beast. It's a whole different ballgame. So
say that again. Yes.
you know, and so it's like we're trying to come from both ends. Yes, you get the money, but what does it look like to manage that money? And this is our first time helping communities through this. Associates, we've never done this. We're trying to find experts, but like we're very much we want to create a shared learning space of like, what are the lessons we're learning? Who are some experts we can come have present in communities, ask questions, and just that community, because managing EPA funding is a huge burden. So I think whether it's on that side of things or the applying side of things, reach out. We're really trying to make sure that communities, you know, are building that capacity and have what they need. So yes.
Awesome. I'm super excited to hear that. I think, you know, I just want to unpack a couple of things that you said. One is that the EPA has rolled out these TICTACs, these technical assistance centers. They are very cool. And I think that, you know, it's important to recognize, especially for communities who are doing a million other things, that there's an extensive support system out there that EPN is part of that is pretty cool. And if you can talk to someone like folks from the EPN, they can connect you to those resources in addition to, you know, the resources they can bring to bear to support your community. So it is a really, you know, it's an ecosystem that unfortunately is rather complex and bureaucratic and sometimes hard to navigate, but we are fortunate to have really cool orgs like EPN, you know, be part of, you know, helping folks navigate all this. So definitely, you know, don't feel like it's too early to reach out, to get connected, to get support. And then I love that y'all are thinking about doing the post-award management stuff and helping folks with that, because that is another part of just like really important it's a really important part of the problem or part of the solution set for this particular problem. So this is super exciting. I love that. There's something to be said for, you know, the continuum of the process, right? So ideally you get a grant, you manage it well, you get more grants, you continue to build and you build these relationships with the agencies. And so having the right support and building that capacity is just going to be critical to like keep this stuff flowing to the right people. I am going to go ahead and tackle, there's another question here. Do you have a network of fiscal sponsors you can connect social enterprises with that are working towards climate justice in the Midwest? We certainly do here at OpenGrants, and maybe Michelle and Sierra do also, but we're happy to make that connection. I'm seeing some negative responses. So yeah, happy to make that connection. And I will just I'll just type an answer out to you here so you can go ahead and just shoot me.
We do not work. Yeah, we do not have fiscal sponsors. And Sidel, do you think it will be helpful for us to go ahead and show the slide with our emails?
Yes, please do. Okay. Because my next question is this. We are at the end here of our session. Appreciate everyone who attended. And for those who are catching this video after we process it and put it out on YouTube, apologies that something funky happened with the Zoom links today. So you may be catching this post instead of live, and we'll be digging into what happened and addressing that. But want to thank so much Kaya, Michelle, and Sierra for coming. I would love to just end on like whatever y'all's call to action is. So if you give folks who are on the call or watching this later a thing to do after listening to this session, what would it be? And obviously you are welcome to reach out and connect with these fine folks at the EPN.
I think one of the things that I will leave this today is on this call, continue to stay connected and observe within your surroundings. Or organizations that you can connect with who are looking for people like you.
Love it.
How am I supposed to top Sierra? Anyways, I feel like for me, I think I didn't know what environmental justice was and like what that looked like before I started doing this work. And so I think like for me, it's just like being kind of similar to what Sierra said, being present to environment, seeing places where you can actively seeing spaces where you can actively work into and where you can bring resources to help like fight for climate and fight for the environment, especially with all the things we've seen this summer in regards to climate and environment. We're at a place where it's always negatively impacted, everybody, but it's becoming more catastrophic. And so I feel like my call to action to everybody around me is to actively, what can we do to try and preserve the planet that we have? So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the amazing work that you all do. It really is super important and also very impressive. So thank you for spending some time with us today and with the community. We will send out this recording as well as this slide and information out to y'all. So thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next month.
Thank you so much, Sidil. Great seeing you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.